Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Not Content Podcast. On this podcast, we pour from the seemingly endless queue of movies, television shows, and maybe even other surprises along the way as part of our podcast channel From the Queue. Please subscribe, like, and review From the Queue on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform, especially Spotify and Apple, as you can get those algorithms going with positive feedback. You can find us on BlueSky at From the Queue. You can find us through Instagram at From the Queue as well as Threads. If you're listening to us on YouTube, all of our links will be in the description below. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Instagram at Jerome Cuson. You can find me on BlueSky at Jerome C1985. My co-host is Brian. You can find him on Twitter for now at Brian and Jerome.
We continue our baseball movie journey with a comedy classic, filled with great one-liners and memorable moments. It was quite the month of April in 1989 to be a baseball fan. Field of Dreams and the movie we are reviewing today both came out in the same month, 2 weeks apart. Of course, I'm talking about Major League, released on April 7th, 1989. Does it age well? Well, we'll find out. And of course, right off the top, we got to mention that the Cleveland Indians no longer are the Indians. They changed the name in 2022 to the Guardians. Right off the top, we got to mention that, obviously, because can't really use those kind of names anymore. People kind of spoke out about it and finally spoke up and got their message heard. And finally, there was some change done. So right off the top, we got to mention that. And of course, it's no longer the Indians, it's the Guardians. But for the purposes of this podcast, we'll just still refer to them as the
We
Indians.
will use the colloquial term in this case, just because that's what they're called, and to not say it would be pretty obnoxious. So we will be calling them, because that is the name in the movie. It is not an endorsement of that name.
For sure. And when doing research for this movie, I was kind of blown away that the fact that this came out the same month of Field of Dreams. Even Jerome didn't realize that. But if you kind of go back and see like a timeline of all these baseball movies, this is, like I mentioned before in the first episode, the first inning. Basically, like, we're in a hot period of baseball movies for the next 4 or 5 years. And I feel like it kind of started out a little bit, like I mentioned, with 8 Men Out, but now we're getting to the wider audience, so to speak, because this movie, like I mentioned, big success, $11 million budget, grossed $75 million worldwide for a comedy. That's great for that time. And not to mention Field of Dreams coming out 2 weeks later and being successful in its own right. So this was a great time to be like a baseball fan and enjoy seeing baseball in the movies. So I can't imagine being, in April of 89, like 2 months later, you also get Batman 89. So there's a lot going on from the spring and summer of 89. You even get the Great American Bash 89 that year. You get SummerSlam 89 that year. A big 1989. And I think Jerome probably remembers that more than I do, obviously, because he's a little older. But right off the top, did you watch Major League and Field of Dreams in theaters?
I did not see either one in theaters. I mean, I think it was a little young. Major League is an R-rated movie. Field of Dreams is PG-13, and I was 4 years old. I'm too young for both of them. I didn't even see Major League 2 in theaters. I was still a little bit young. I'm not sure which Major League I actually saw first. Funny enough, I don't know, because Major League has pretty much been a staple on either USA or AMC pretty much since I was a child. It's just been one of those movies that is in the regular rotation because I think it's just very rewatchable. And again, I'm not sure which one of these I saw first, which probably speaks to how similar they are. We'll get to that, I'm sure, in a few months. But yeah, I think this is just a classic sports underdog movie, heavily influenced, no doubt, by the Bad News Bears that came out about a decade earlier, also influenced by a number of teams across a number of sports, moving from one city to the next. And just a year before, the White Sox were threatening to move to Tampa. There were always rumors of another Florida team in Miami. That's the big tease here. So some real life elements playing into this, of course. The Cleveland baseball team not has had a very bad streak of years, right up there with the Red Sox, with the Cubs, with the White Sox, the San Francisco Giants, teams that went a very long time, decades between winning world championships. And funny enough, the team that now currently has the longest streak is the Cleveland Guardians. So it's very fitting that we are talking about this.
Yeah, we'll talk about that 2016 World Series a little bit later because there was a lot going on in terms of curses and all that kind of thing for that World Series, and everyone was kind of rooting on both of them, both the Cubs and the Indians at the time. Like I was rooting for both. So, little background on this movie: director and writer David S. Ward grew up a Cleveland Indians fan. Wouldn't you know it? But he figured that the only time he would see them winning or win anything would be in a movie. So he wrote the movie to kind of live out his sports fantasy. And during this time when the movie came out, like it started like a 4-year skid for the Indians. So I guess he just picked the wrong time or the right time. Who knows? Knowing Cleveland sports history. But so he got to put the movie together. Got the budget together for Paramount, so they got everyone together. And of course, we mentioned Charlie Sheen had already just been filming 8 Men Out, so he was just perfect for the role. And I guess he was played baseball, like we mentioned before, in his youth, and he couldn't get to 101 miles an hour, obviously, because he's not that kind of pitcher. And he even took steroids, apparently, which I thought was hilarious because it didn't help shit. He just topped at 89 every time, but it kind of worked for the movie because the way the movie's shot. Even if you shoot it and he's throwing 89 miles an hour, the way you can kind of film things, you can make it look like 101 miles an hour based on like cuts and quick cuts and stuff like that. So they kind of covered it up, but at least he was putting the work, you know what I'm saying? Like he had the look, he had the position, he had the stances correct. So I got
You're absolutely right, Brian. And I want everybody go watch Tim Robbins throw in Bull Durham, and then go watch Charlie Sheen in Major League, and you will develop a new appreciation for how good Charlie Sheen looked in terms of actually being able to pitch a baseball. Charlie Sheen's delivery actually looks plausible. Tim Robbins looks ridiculous.
Yeah, we'll talk about that next month in the third inning. But yeah, because Charlie Sheen, man, like he's got that experience. Like I mentioned, he literally just filmed another baseball movie, so he was in that right mindset. And really quick, I want to mention there is no way in today's baseball that they would find out that a relief pitcher or even a starting pitcher, whatever kind of pitcher, would have that kind of vision going out into the field like that. No way. Today they would have medical staff evaluate the guy before he's even in spring training. So I thought that was a little ridiculous. I don't even know how it was going in 1989 because, I mean, another note I got here is that Willie Mays Hayes, played by Wesley Snipes, just comes in off the street, not even invited, and just sneaks onto the team and gets accepted into the role and becomes an all-star. He was a dude off the street, and he just came in, and they just accepted him. So I thought that was pretty funny. Like, looking back all these years, you just don't realize that he just kind of sneaks in. He's not an actual athlete, and he just gets on the team, and he starts stealing bases, and then all of a sudden he's like a king of small ball. So it was just really interesting on that end. But yeah, and the Bob Uecker, of course, legendary Bob Uecker. First, I knew him from WrestleMania 4. Of course, Jerome knows him from WrestleMania 4 as well. The only guy holding that show together. It seems like Monsoon, Jesse Ventura, and Bob Uecker were holding that show together in those dead spots in that 4-hour show. And thank
you forget that he was also at WrestleMania 3, Brian. He was the only person to do back-to-back WrestleManias as a celebrity who wasn't Trump. So I want to point that out. WrestleMania 4 is important, but more importantly, he is the fourth man in the ring for Hulk Hogan and Andre Giant at WrestleMania 3.
See, that's the thing. I watched WrestleMania 3 at least a couple years after I saw 4. So 4 was like the go-to for me when I saw Bob Uecker. I wasn't a Mr. Belvedere fan, but then, of course, years later when I watched Major League, and I was like, God, this guy is, like, great. And then you find out that he was, like, calling Brewers again for 20 years before that, and the director didn't even know that. He just casted him based off what he'd seen on TV of Bob Uecker. So that was just great. It's like he subconsciously picked the right guy without even knowing it that he was an actual baseball announcer. And Bob Uecker in this movie is just doing like a lot of like off the cuff stuff. just a bit outside. I mean, that classic line he made up on the fly. So a lot of the stuff, he's not given a script. He's just kind of going along with it, kind of going what he's watching. And I'm sure it was his idea to have a big bottle of Jack at the beginning of the movie. Just ridiculous stuff, man. It just goes to show you how bad this team is. But yeah, just hilarious that they went, down that route. And of course, you got the Jobu, god that is being, praised and worshipped by what's his name? Romero? Is it Romero? I forget.
Pedro
But
Serrano. How
Pedro
dare you forget Pedro
Serrano,
Serrano?
who would become the president on TV years later. But I just, that
More
influence of the
importantly,
doll.
was the driver on Heat. More importantly, the driver in Heat.
That's true too. That's true too. A lot of these actors had a good career after this. Like these were like small roles for these actors that they would go on to do bigger things. But that Jobu doll is kind of like an influence because in the 2016 baseball season for the Cleveland Indians at the time, Jason Kipnis and Mike Napoli used that and actually got good luck out of it. And if you look at the stats, I don't know if it had anything to do with them going to the World Series that year or whatnot, but that was an interesting thing I didn't even know about when I looked it up. But being on this legacy kind of team, like it's of course you're going to look back to the movie and get these kind of ideas. And baseball superstitions go a long way, sports superstitions go a long way. I have my superstitions on some things, and it's we'll see how they play out later on. But I thought that was just hilarious because like even years later, the movie is such an influence on the team, on the modern team, that they're still doing the rituals from the movie. So I thought that was incredible. And we mentioned that this is kind of like a hodgepodge of different sports stories. Your Bad News Bears type of team, your bad sports franchises over the years. But apparently, the Rachel Phelps character is based on Calvin Griffith, who was the owner of the Twins. And in the 70s, he tried to move the team to what was it? Tampa? Yeah, he tried to move the team to Tampa and failed. Luckily, there was a buyout from an investor in the third year of this contract where there was like a 3-year deal. If they went below 1.4 million in attendance per year, they were going to leave the town, and they were on their way out because the attendance was not hitting that mark. But fortunately, an outside investor came in to kind of save the team. But that was really kind of the influences to the main structure. But of course, nowadays, I would say everyone's comparing this team from Major League to the Oakland A's, which I've done many a times in the last few years. And as of this recording, they are one of the worst teams in baseball, but not the worst team in baseball, but still, like, it just feels like that owner of the A's is just like such a snob and an asshole. And that quote about him, like when a bunch of A's fans showed up for one game, he went and said, "Oh, this is what it's like to have an actual baseball franchise fan and have fans supporting you," and that kind of thing. So just this constant like insults to the fans. I don't know, man. The whole A's thing is sad because now they're going to Sacramento for 3 seasons to wait for the baseball stadium in Vegas to be built. So they're going to be the Sacramento A's of Oakland or something. I don't know, or the Oakland A's of Sacramento. It's just ridiculous.
My understanding. So the deal in Vegas is not official yet. They don't have a deal. They're going to be playing in Sacramento for 3 years as the A's with no city affiliation whatsoever. I have a feeling they're just going to end up staying in Sacramento because it seems like there's like one person in Vegas that wants this deal, and that's it.
We'll see, because I think, man, I would love it if it was going to be on the Strip where they tore the Tropicana down, folks. So they're really going to build that stadium no matter what. Like, there's plans to build it. The money's there. So I don't know. It's just about, crossing the T's and dotting the I's apparently on the contract. So we'll see on that one. But a very interesting story to follow in the next couple of years. But it does seem like this is like the real life Major League playing out in a far more, it's just not one season. It's going to be playing out over like a 4 or 5 season kind of drama arc thing for the A's. So that's unfortunate. But yeah, it sucks because I know the fact that like I played the franchise mode on MLB The Show recently, and they openly put out the numbers. Like, it's not like a hidden thing, and they show you the numbers for each team, and it's just like Oakland doesn't want to spend the money. They have enough money to spend to be a reasonable team, and they just don't spend that money even. So it's like they're not even trying to be a reasonable team. So that's unfortunate. But yeah, that's kind of like the comparison nowadays. And of course, we know like the movie, it's all about this team that's owned by this, this new owner, this showgirl that recently took over the team because the husband died and the husband was the real owner, and now she's trying to tank the team to move it right to Miami. And of course, Miami got a team years later and ended up winning two World Series. But um, the thing that I found interesting is that like when the team does find out that it's being sabotaged, right? They mentioned the record; they are 60-61, and so that's when they have that big team meeting, and then we get the famous line, Jerome. What's the line?
Guess there's only one thing left to do. Win the whole fucking thing. And then we get a montage, and it's incredible stuff. Like it's not high art, but I mean when he says that line, and then you immediately go to the montage of them winning the game and slowly stripping the standee of the owner. Then I mean it's classic stuff. Like it's classic sports movie stuff. And the score for this movie, the songs that are used, also do a tremendous job in contributing to the feel of this movie. Music is so important to sports movies. Just think about Rocky. I just saw Challengers this weekend, and the score for that movie just adds so much to the scenes, and the same is true in this case. And I know you're very enthusiastic about the music as well, but the Penna Fever song is a banger.
Absolutely, and that doesn't even have lyrics. It's just like a piece they wrote for the movie, and it's kind of iconic because they use it in the second one too. But I want to mention in that meeting, they mentioned the record that they are 60-61. So at that point, it's 121 games. It's a 162 game season. So around that time, that's a meeting that takes place like August 20th, August 19th, and from there on, they go 30-11. Now, it's not that crazy. I've seen team do this all the time. Like you just got to get on a run, and those are the teams that are dangerous in the playoffs that get hot August, September, and are just like they can't lose. And that's what happened with the Rangers last year, and they won the World Series. We've seen it before with that Astro team with Roger Clemens and Bagwell and all them in like 03, 04, 05. Like they got hot at the right time. They were like the worst team in the summer, and all of a sudden they come back and not only do they win the wild card, but they go to the World Series in 05. So I've seen this before, man, and it's like a thing. It's all about getting hot, you know what I mean? And it's not just about having the biggest record and then coasting for the last two seasons to rest your players, and all of a sudden you're not even doing well in the playoffs. I speak on that because I've seen it with the Dodgers, but like it's all about getting hot. And I just thought this was like a prime example of that. Even in '89, it's all about a team getting hot at the right time. 30-11 is tough, considering that you're 60-61. That's like a miracle season type thing, and it does happen every once in a while. Because if you look at the record of the Rangers around this time, I would say in July, before even August, I think they had like a 500 record, and they went on to win 90 games, and that was enough to win the World Series. So, just crazy stuff, man. And I got to mention the soundtrack, like you did. Randy Newman, who's like an icon of baseball fans, and especially in LA with "I Love LA." But man, he really sets the tone with that song. Kind of sets you up at the city of Cleveland, city of lights. Just really sets the tone for the movie. It's all about the working class, it feels like. And of course, you got Wild Thing, which is iconic now because of John Moxley, and I was there in Vegas when they did that Anarchy in the Arena match, and they looped the song twice. I remember the crowd just losing their mind. Like once the song ended, everyone was kind of like, "Oh man, what are they gonna do now?" And then they looped the song, and I remember the whole arena just losing their shit. So credit to Moxley for bringing the song back. I know they kind of flubbed it at first by using the original when they first used it on AEW, but they got this version of it by the band X, which is like a Japanese girl punk band or whatever. Which it really works. It really works for Charlie Sheen, and now because of that, it seems like it's kind of influenced baseball where we got these like middle relief pitchers coming in with entrance music, and that wasn't a thing until like I guess Major League. So credit to Major League for bringing that out because it does add another element of excitement to the game. It always adds that extra piece of drama. It's like, okay, you got this big entrance. Is this guy going to live up to the expectations of the big entrance? I forgot that player from New York. Do you know who I'm talking about? The Mets, who came out with that awesome Latin song.
Yeah, I don't know his name, but it's very much become a tradition. Like Mariano Rivera would come out to enter Sandman, and that's probably the most famous in terms of like bullpen songs. But yeah, they definitely do that to this day, and it's kind of a fun thing to do. But yeah, I can't recall I know, the White Sox used to play na na hey hey when a pitcher got pulled, but that's different than when a pitcher came into the game. So I'm not sure like when this tradition started, but funny enough, there was a bullpen pitcher in this era called Wild Thing. It was Mitch Williams of the Philadelphia Phillies, who infamously allowed a walk-off home run to Joe Carter in the 1993 World Series. So there is a Wild Thing in the history of baseball. I don't know if he came out to this very same song. You mentioned John Moxley, but Brian, how dare you forget that John Moxley is aping directly off Onita, who would come out, I think, to a different version of the song, sounding similar to the X one, but definitely has a little bit of a different vibe. So it is a direct homage to Anita, not necessarily this movie.
Yeah, I get you. I know, but I think Onita got it from this. I don't know. It just feels like this was like
It
the
probably
main.
is not. You're probably not
Yeah,
incorrect,
but Onita
but
is like this awesome grand entrance, like a badass entrance, very similar to what Moxley does. So I get that, and I always forget that part. But yeah, I just because I think Onita watched Major League and got it from there. But I'm trying to put the timeline together because FMW started around the same time Major League came out. So I don't know, but I do see that connection as well. But it's just great to see that influence and how the game can change over the years. And I want kind of more, like I want more changes to the game for like not necessarily with fucking with the rules. Like I'm still iffy on the whole extra innings rules stuff, but like adding new elements to the game to make it more entertaining like this. I love that. And I love how times can change like that. So that was a cool reflection of the time and how 30 years later we still got that, those entrance themes. So that's really cool. One thing we got to talk about though is this weird stalkerish relationship that Jake and Lynn have, played by Rene Russo. Jake is I don't know what she sees in this guy, man. Honesty, he's a great leader on the field, but he is not a good romantic partner. Very stalkerish, very pushy. Doesn't like to take no for an answer. Feels like, but she just ends up with him anyway. And it leads to my theory that if they lose that game against the Yankees, then they don't get back together. And I think that's my theory. And the fact that he does
I
win the
mean,
game.
I think they would anyway. But um, and you're not going to believe this, but the relationship with Rich and the women in the next movie is actually worse than this, if you can believe it. So it's not going to get any better. This is bad. This is definitely the weakest part of the movie. And honestly, when I'm rewatching this movie on my own and not for the purposes of this podcast, I will definitely find myself fast forwarding to those scenes because it's just not entertaining at all, and it's not Rene Russo or Tom Berenger's fault. The scenes are just poorly written out, and it just makes Jake look like a real creep. And I don't think that that's. I mean, again, if this movie were made now, you just wouldn't get. I don't even know what kind of subplot you would get, but it would look very, very different than this one. As I mentioned to you, I feel confident that there's a 2 hour and 20-minute cut of this movie because there's a lot of things that kind of come out of nowhere or are very lightly touched upon and then not brought up again. Again, I would be very curious to see what the longer version of this movie looks like.
I'm curious as well because we still don't get a lot of like backstory on Willie Mays Hayes, which I feel like they kind of set that up a little bit in the beginning, and then they kind of went away from his character. And then what kind of bugs me is that we find out later on, like in the third act, that Jake and Charlie Sheen, they're like roommates, and we don't find that out till later on. I'm just like, I think we just missed out on some great scenes between the two as like roommates having like down to earth conversations and shit like that. So I thought that was kind of like, oh man, what a waste. Like you could have taken advantage of that whole set piece right there in the apartment and just kind of made it another thing as opposed to going with this other romantic angle that kind of seems kind of creepy now 30 years later. So there's just a lot left on the table. And Roger Dorn, right? Like him and his wife, what's going on there? And the wife ends up cheating on him with Charlie Sheen. And it's just like, you know, and then he just punches him at the end, but they embrace each other. So it's like he forgives him. It's like, okay, I guess that's where we're going with that. And they don't have to do that, but they just wanted to create that tension because they were having that kind of tension at the beginning of the movie, and they didn't really like fix it or like resolve it. So I guess they had to come up with something. But at least with like we got the home run, we got the home run with the curveball. And I like this too. Is like I don't know if this is like still a thing nowadays, but all the like the Vagisil, the hair cream, all that stuff that he has as the picture. I forget what his name, but like man, just the old school
They,
pictures.
they check for substances now, so I'm sure that if they're getting away with it, they're being much more subtle and careful about how they're using substances because umpires are constantly checking the pitchers after every half inning. It seems like, and I just don't know. Like clearly in '89, this is definitely a thing. I mean, Phil Necro used to carry like sandpaper with him so that he could doctor the ball. There's a lot of rumors about different people using like KY jelly and different substances to get more of a grip on the ball because that way it'll help especially your breaking pitches. It'll make a huge difference. But again, I have no doubt that substances are still being used, but it is way more difficult to get it done now as opposed to this time period. It's just baseball has a very unique history because although they pretend to dislike cheating, cheating is a very important part of the game historically from the 1890s when the game really started to become popular all the way until now. Cheating is still very much a factor. There's still going to be scandals and all that good stuff. I mean, think about the Astros using the stupid trash cans. I mean, that's how much cheating is either tacitly endorsed or not necessarily. People look the other way.
Yeah, and I thought it was just this great little speech he was giving because it's all about the older veterans and the young kids, and we see that in like every single sport, including wrestling. The older you get, it's like kid, try to take less bumps so you can have more bumps on your bump card. Kid, get it? And it's kind of like that because you can't throw for 100 miles an hour for all your career. You're going to throw your arm out, and God knows how many Tommy John surgeries we've had nowadays, and the rise of Tommy John. And especially this year, it seems like they had some rule changes and now we have more pitcher injuries than ever. It seems like it's about to hit a record this year. We'll see. I don't know. But again, things change. Once the rules change, people start throwing the ball differently. Injuries can happen differently, and that's kind of what we're seeing right now. Um, I also wanted to point out that Jake mentioned that he was making the league minimum, right? So the league minimum in 1989, $68,000. Today, $740,000. Big, big difference, and they certainly earned it, and they deserve it. The baseball players, especially like the one, I mean, they're putting their bodies out there. I mean, 162 games a year. Yeah, baseball is not as physically, you know, engaging as like basketball or football, but my God, 162 games a year. Guys that are not totally in shape. We talk about a guy like I mentioned, a CC Sabathia. The dude probably could have had 5 more years in his career if he didn't throw so much gas at his size, and he didn't really adapt to changing up and changing speeds and he just went for gas, and that's what got him the World Series in 2009. But after that, it was just pretty much that was his list. That was his kind of big run, and didn't really have a run after that. So he's kind of like my example of kind of learning but not adapting. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes you just go for it, and then you want to just have one big run in your career and that's it, but you don't want to have longevity. So you kind of see that difference. But at least now players are getting paid better at the minimum. $740,000 is much more respectable, obviously. So that's a big difference between now and then that I wanted to point out. Overall, I think this movie has great performances, great one-liners. I found this article on sportingnews.com that there's so many one-liners that they ranked them all, and it's like 30 of them. And the top two go to Bob Uecker. So you can kind of rank them however you want, but this movie has so many great one-liners. I think it's so memorable. That's what adds to the rewatchability of it all. And the characters are really, they're not totally well fleshed out, but they do have good performances with like Wesley Snipes, Rene Russo, Tom Berenger. Charles F. Cypher, for crying out loud, is in this as like the second level manager of the team. And of course, you got Corbin Burnson. Just so many names. And I just felt like there wasn't like a big star, but because of that, they had to come together as kind of like, an ensemble piece. This is more like an ensemble piece than having a single starring role. And in the sequel, they kind of switch it to Charlie Sheen because he's the bigger star now. So that's kind of where that shift goes into in the second movie. But I like this one more. Obviously, it's more spread out and everyone gets the love. And of course, you get that famous American Express card pseudo commercial, which I always find funny because it's like the team is only doing well for a month, and they get a commercial out of it in that same month. So you never know with sports, endorsements nowadays. But that was pretty funny and still memorable at the same time. So 8 out of 10. A lot of good positives. Like the baseball in this movie is very well shot. Like that, the last third act is just very well shot for a night game. Very well done. And I think you just as a whole like the whole movie, the way it's shot too, right?
I think the movie is extremely well done. I think that for everything that we can do with the camera now, I think sometimes it's just helpful to get your camera, turn the lights on, and just shoot. I mean, I think this is still able to capture the epic feel of an important baseball game without like being too try hard, because I think a lot of movies are very much into trying really hard. And I think that for Bob Uecker to just come in here as a baseball announcer, somehow able to parody a baseball announcer while being one himself is really impressive. I feel like there are not a lot of people that could really do that. Look at cameos from like Al Michaels and Bob Costas in basketball. Like they try it and it doesn't come off very well at all. It comes across like two guys who are just doing a performance. It doesn't come across like a guy who is actually announcing the game. And that's the thing that Bob Uecker does so well, is that yes, he is a parody of himself, but he is actually conveying what's going on in the game, and that's super important because without him, I don't think you're getting as much of a sense of what is going on in the game, establishing. He does a lot of exposition work in certain scenes, so it's very impressive what Uecker does, not just from making the one-liners, but also creating the comedy but also explaining what's going on as well. Again, I think the performances. I mean, for a comedy, I think this is very strong. You know, Corbin Bernsen is a big star at this point. Like LA Law is a huge show, and Corbin Bernsen is a part of that show, so he's a big deal. You know, Charlie Sheen was on the rise. Tom Berenger was a pretty big star at this point. So you got three relatively big stars, and then you've got the rising, Rene Russo and Wesley Snipes would certainly be bigger deals in the next few years. And so many of these individuals have had really, really solid careers across the board. And I just think that this movie works in ways that the second one doesn't, and especially the third one. I mean, the third one's just awful, but I think this first movie is really good. I think that what it is able to do is it is able to execute a formula of the underdog sports movie just extremely well. Like, is it predictable? Yes, it is, but it's extremely fun. It's well acted. It's funny. It does all of the things that you would want it to do. And also, it's extremely rewatchable. That's the other thing, is that, it comes in hour and 45 minutes, perfectly length. You don't want, I mean, again, I know I mentioned wanting to see the 2 hour, 20-minute version, but to me, the 1 hour, 45-minute version is the ideal one for a movie like this.
Absolutely. And I want to also mention that I think the insert shots of the working class people of Cleveland really adds a nice touch to the film. At first they're all like insulting, like, who the fuck are these guys? Who's this guy? And then by like halfway through, like, these guys ain't too bad. And then by the end of it, they're all like doing the wild thing. So I thought that was a great little touch to the movie. It pads about 2 or 3 minutes of the movie, but it makes it seem like the city's behind them by the end of the movie, from not wanting to be behind the team at all. So that was a really nice touch. Overall, this is an 8 out of 10 for me. I think, like you said, this is very rewatchable. The only hint, the things that kind of ding it are obviously the Jake and Lynn relationship, that not flying nowadays, but everything else kind of, does well. I just, wish we kind of got a little more on the character development for like Wesley Snipes' character, the Hayes character, because yeah, like I mentioned, where did he come from? He just comes off the street with no background, and they just accepted him into the team and got a contract. So crazy stuff, crazy times. This kind of wraps up our discussion for Major League. This is the second inning. We're going to have more innings, obviously, in the coming months. But the next inning is going to be Field of Dreams for sure, because this was 2 weeks before that. It's going to be a more emotional kind of episode. That movie is just kind of magic all over the place in that one. So that's going to be great to talk about. But next week, we're kind of going back to the right match. And with the release of the Furiosa standalone movie coming out, I guess we figured it was the right time to kind of review the Thunderdome, right? From Halloween Havoc '89, Sting and Ric Flair versus the Great Muta and Terry Funk in the Thunderdome cage match. We're gonna watch Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, which, listen, it's my favorite one to watch. It's not the best one, obviously, but there's a lot of like sports entertainment stuff going on in that movie that's really like influential, even to like to the point where Tupac and Dr. Dre recreated the cage and did their California Love video in that set, so it's kind of iconic. And then of course you got Tina Turner, who is, I don't know if she's chewing scenery or not, but she certainly just captivates the screen. And that's all I'm going to say, because I feel like she does a really great job in that role, and she doesn't have a lot of acting roles after that. But I feel like she just steals the screen as that character, and her running that underground fighting cage thing is great. The ending's not that great, obviously, but I feel like this Mad Max movie is fun to watch. And it's the one with the kids at the end, which is kind of stupid, I know, but overall, I think the fight scene in the cage is worth it, and we're gonna do the right match with it. And I'll talk about some things that kind of, I don't know if Jerome has noticed over the years with the Halloween Havoc match, like that gangster dude that's following Terry Funk to the ring to make sure no one's shooting at him. Did you notice that?
I will. I will definitely look out for it as I'm watching. As I'm watching the match, I will definitely look out for that. But yes, very much looking forward to it. Next week will be the only time we ever talk about a Mel Gibson movie. I'm making an exception because it is Mad Max, and really, you can't talk about the franchise. We did an episode in the past on Fury Road, which generally is considered one of the best action movies of all time. I would agree with that sentiment. I'm very much looking forward to Furiosa, and we're going to talk about Thunderdome because, really, in terms of making it cohesive with the right match, it's the one that makes the most sense.
Absolutely. And I can also talk about those cool videos that they shot for Halloween Havoc '89 that no one remembers, and they made it seem so epic. But yeah, I have a lot of memories of that match as well. So that's it for this episode. It's the second inning, and we'll of course talk about Field of Dreams in the third inning next month. But next week is the right match, so we're looking forward to that one. Thank you for listening. I'm Brian. That's Jerome, and we'll talk to you again soon.